The grand ballroom at the Palm Beach Medical Center sparkled under crystal chandeliers on a warm Florida evening. It was the annual Breakthrough in Medicine Gala, where the brightest minds in healthcare gathered to celebrate innovation and raise funds for groundbreaking research. Among the guests was Dr. Michelle Jean, a remarkable neurosurgeon whose wheelchair glided smoothly across the polished marble floor. Despite the challenges life had thrown at her after a childhood accident, Dr. Zhang had become one of the most respected names in spinal cord research. Tonight, she wore a deep blue evening dress that complemented her confident smile as she navigated through clusters of guests in expensive suits and flowing gowns. The room buzzed with excitement. Word had spread that former President Donald Trump would be attending as a guest of honor. Dr. Zhang wasn't particularly focused on the celebrity guest list. Her mind was on the presentation she would give later about her team's latest breakthrough in spinal cord regeneration. As she made her way toward the refreshment table, she couldn't help but notice how the crowd's energy shifted. People began turning their heads, and the usual murmur of conversation grew louder. Donald Trump had just entered the ballroom, accompanied by his security detail and a small entourage. Dr. Zhang continued her path to get a glass of water, not expecting to interact with the former president. She was used to people either awkwardly avoiding eye contact with her wheelchair or showing excessive, uncomfortable politeness. But what happened next caught her completely off guard. As she reached for a glass, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Excuse me, doctor." The voice was unmistakable, that distinct New York accent that had filled countless news broadcasts and rallies. She turned her wheelchair to find Donald Trump standing there, his eyes drawn to the hospital badge clipped to her evening purse. "I couldn't help but notice your badge from the Neuroscience Center," Trump said, gesturing to the credential. "They do incredible work there, really incredible. Some of the best doctors in the world." Dr. Zhang smiled, pleasantly surprised by his genuine interest. "Yes, we have an amazing team," she replied, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had earned their place at the top of their field. "I lead the Spinal Cord Regeneration Research Department." Trump's eyebrows raised with interest. "Spinal cord research? That's fascinating. You know, I've met many people, wonderful people, who could benefit from advances in this field. Tell me more about what you're working on." The initial awkwardness that often accompanied such encounters melted away as Dr. Zhang began explaining her work. She was used to simplifying complex medical concepts, but she found herself impressed by Trump's engaged questions and the way he connected her research to real people he'd met during his campaigns and presidency. Other guests began to notice the animated conversation between the former president and the doctor in the wheelchair. Small groups started gathering nearby, drawn by the unusual sight of Trump so intently focused on a scientific discussion, but neither Trump nor Dr. Zhang seemed to notice the growing audience. "You see, Mr. President," Dr. Zhang explained, her hands moving expressively as she spoke, "we've discovered a new way to stimulate nerve regeneration using a combination of stem cell therapy and bioelectric signals. The results in our initial trials have been very promising." Trump nodded, his usual bombastic style softened by genuine curiosity. "That's remarkable, truly remarkable. And you know what strikes me? Your passion for this work. It's obvious you're not just doing a job, you're on a mission." Dr. Zhang's eyes lit up at his observation. "Exactly. When I was 12, the accident that put me in this wheelchair taught me something important. It's not about what happens to you, it's about what you do about it. I decided to turn my experience into something that could help others." The conversation might have continued longer, but a member of Trump's entourage gently reminded him that he was expected to meet with the event organizers. Before leaving, Trump surprised Dr. Zhang with a question that would set in motion a chain of unexpected events. "Doctor, I'd love to hear more about your research. Would you be willing to share your presentation with me later? I have some friends in the medical investment field who should know about this work you're doing." As Trump moved away to fulfill his official duties at the gala, Dr. Zhang sat quietly for a moment, processing what had just happened. In all her years of attending medical functions, she'd never experienced an interaction quite like this one. Something told her this evening was about to become much more interesting than she'd anticipated. Little did she know This chance encounter would not only change the trajectory of her research, but would also challenge many people's preconceptions about disability, about politics, and about the power of unexpected connections to change lives. The evening at the Palm Beach Medical Center Gala was in full swing when Trump returned to continue his conversation with Dr. Michelle Zhang. This time, he pulled up a chair to sit at her eye level, something that didn't go unnoticed by the doctor. It was a simple gesture that spoke volumes about respect and genuine interest. "You know," Trump began, settling into his seat, "I've been thinking about what you said earlier about nerve regeneration. Back when I was in office, I met a young veteran, incredible guy, absolutely incredible, who could have benefited from this kind of research." Dr. Zhang leaned forward slightly, her eyes bright with interest. She presented her research countless times, but something felt different about this conversation. Maybe it was the way Trump connected each scientific concept to real people he'd met, transforming complex medical theories into human stories. "The thing that fascinates me most," she explained, pulling out her tablet to show some simplified diagrams, "is how the body can heal itself if we just give it the right tools. Here, let me show you something interesting." Trump's usual rapid-fire speaking style slowed as he focused on the images. "That's the spinal cord?" he asked, pointing to a detailed illustration. Other guests nearby couldn't help but do double takes at the sight of the former president totally absorbed in a medical discussion. "Exactly," Dr. Zhang replied, zooming in on the image. "See these nerve fibers? When they're damaged, it's like a broken bridge. Our research is finding ways to rebuild those bridges." She smiled as she noticed Trump's genuine fascination with the concept. "You know what this reminds me of?" Trump said, straightening in his chair. "Construction. I've built buildings all my life, and sometimes the biggest challenge isn't the construction itself, it's getting all the right permits and approvals. I imagine you face similar challenges in medical research." Dr. Zhang couldn't help but laugh. "That's actually a perfect analogy. Just last month, we spent more time on paperwork than actual lab work. It's like trying to build a skyscraper while the blueprint keeps changing." Their conversation was interrupted by a waiter offering appetizers. Trump insisted Dr. Zhang try the stuffed mushrooms, claiming they were the best, absolutely the best. As they shared this simple moment over food, the formal barrier between former president and doctor continued to dissolve. "Tell me about the moment you knew this was your calling," Trump asked, surprising Dr. Zhang with the personal nature of the question. She took a thoughtful pause before responding. "I was in rehabilitation after my accident," she began, her voice soft but steady. "There was this nurse who would tell me about all the new research happening in spinal cord treatment. She made it sound like solving a fascinating puzzle rather than treating an injury. That's when I realized I could either be someone who waited for a cure or someone who helped create one." Trump nodded slowly, unusually quiet. "That's what makes America great," he finally said, his voice carrying none of its usual campaign energy, just simple sincerity. "People like you who turn personal challenges into solutions for others." As their conversation continued, other guests began gathering nearby, drawn not by Trump's celebrity status, but by the engaging discussion about medical innovation. A prominent hospital board member joined them, followed by a tech entrepreneur known for investing in healthcare startups. "Mr. President," Dr. Zhang said, noticing the growing crowd, "I never expected to have this kind of in-depth discussion about spinal cord research at a gala." Trump grinned. "Sometimes the best conversations happen when you least expect them. You know what? I think some people here need to hear more about your work. The funding, the challenges, everything." He stood up, smoothing his suit jacket. "Would you mind if I shared some of what you've told me with the whole room? People need to know about this. They really do." Dr. Zhang felt a mix of surprise and anticipation. She was used to presenting her research to medical professionals, but having a former president amplify her work to a room full of potential supporters. That was definitely not how she expected this evening to go. As Trump asked one of his aides to speak with the event organizers about making an impromptu speech, Dr. Zhang watched the room buzz with activity. She thought about all the grant applications sitting on her desk back at the lab, all the promising research waiting for funding, all the patients waiting for breakthroughs. Maybe sometimes the biggest breakthroughs don't happen in the lab at all. Sometimes they happen because the right people have the right conversation at the right moment. As Trump returned to tell her they'd have the floor in 10 minutes, Dr. Zhang realized this unexpected encounter might just change everything, not just for her research, but for all the patients who could benefit from it. The evening was about to take another unexpected turn, and the ripple effects would reach far beyond the glittering ballroom of Palm Beach Medical Center. The elegant ballroom had fallen silent as Trump took the microphone, with Dr. Michelle Zhang positioned nearby in her wheelchair. The crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the assembled crowd of medical professionals, business leaders, and philanthropists. "Ladies and gentlemen," Trump began, his voice carrying its familiar confidence, but with an unusual touch of humility. "Sometimes the most important moments happen by chance. Tonight, I met someone extraordinary. A brilliant doctor who's doing things nobody thought possible just a few years ago." Dr. Zhang felt her heart racing. She was used to presenting at medical conferences, but this was different. The former president continued, gesturing towards her with genuine admiration. "You know, when I was in business and later as president, people would always tell me it can't be done. But the real champions, the true innovators, they don't listen to that. They find a way." And that's exactly what Dr. Zhang is doing with her spinal cord research. Taking his cue, Dr. Zhang moved her wheelchair forward. Trump handed her the microphone, and she took a deep breath before speaking. "Thank you, Mr. President," she began, her voice steady and clear. "You know, when I was first injured, doctors told my parents what I wouldn't be able to do. But they never counted on what I would be able to do." The room was completely silent now, every eye focused on the doctor as she continued. "Today, our research team is discovering ways to help damaged nerve cells regenerate. We're not just talking about treating symptoms, we're talking about actual healing." She pulled up a simple diagram on the large screens around the room. "Imagine your spinal cord is like a complex highway system. When there's damage, it's like a bridge collapsing. Traffic, or in this case, nerve signals, can't get through. What we're developing is essentially a way to rebuild those bridges." Trump, who had been listening intently, stepped forward again. "You know what amazes me? Dr. Zhang could have chosen any field of medicine, but she chose the very thing that changed her own life. That's not just science. That's personal. That's powerful." A prominent neurosurgeon in the audience raised his hand. "Dr. Zhang, I've read about your team's experimental treatments. The success rates you're achieving, they're unprecedented." Dr. Zhang nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, and that's just the beginning. We've discovered that by combining traditional stem cell therapy with our new bioelectric stimulation technique, we're seeing nerve regeneration rates that were considered impossible 5 years ago." Trump interjected with his characteristic energy. "And let me tell you, folks, this isn't just about numbers and research papers. This is about real people. I've met thousands of Americans, veterans, accident survivors, children with spinal conditions, who could benefit from this work." The atmosphere in the room had transformed. What started as a typical charity gala had become something more meaningful. People were leaning forward in their seats, taking notes, whispering excitedly to each other. A well-known tech investor stood up. "Dr. Zhang, what's the biggest obstacle you're facing right now?" She didn't hesitate. "Scale. We know our treatment works in clinical trials, but expanding the research requires significant resources. Every day we wait is another day someone who could be helped has to wait." Trump nodded knowingly. "You know what I hear in Dr. Zhang's voice? The same thing I've heard in every great innovator I've met. It's not just about the science, it's about helping people. And when someone has that kind of drive, that kind of mission, you bet on them." He turned to address the whole room. "Look around. In this room, we have the people who could help turn this research into reality. Not in 10 years, not in 5 years, but now. Right now." Dr. Zhang felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she blinked them back. This wasn't about emotion. This was about action. She watched as people in the audience began reaching for their phones, taking down contact information, making notes. A distinguished older gentleman in the front row stood up. "Dr. Zhang, I'm on the board of 3 major medical research foundations. We need to talk about your work in detail. This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for." As more people began standing up, asking questions, offering cards and contacts, Dr. Zhang caught Trump's eye. He gave her a knowing smile and a slight nod. They both understood what was happening. This wasn't just a presentation or a fundraising pitch. This was the moment when vision met opportunity, when the right people with the right resources discovered the right cause. The evening was far from over, but something had shifted in that ballroom. A chance encounter between a former president and a determined doctor had sparked something bigger than either of them had anticipated. As the room buzzed with excitement and possibility, Dr. Zhang realized that sometimes the biggest breakthroughs don't happen in the lab, they happen when people dare to believe in something bigger than themselves. As the excitement from the presentation settled, Trump and Dr. Michelle Zhang found themselves in a quieter corner of the ballroom, surrounded by a smaller group of genuinely interested investors and medical professionals. The crystal chandeliers still sparkled overhead, but the conversation had shifted from inspirational to practical. "Let's talk about the real challenges," Trump said, leaning forward in his chair. "In business, I've learned that success isn't just about having a great idea, it's about overcoming the obstacles. What's really standing in your way, Doctor?" Dr. Zhang appreciated his directness. Taking a sip of water, she began to explain the complex web of challenges her team faced. "The biggest hurdle isn't actually the science anymore," she said, her hands moving expressively as she spoke. "It's the system itself." A healthcare investor in an expensive suit nodded knowingly. "The bureaucracy can be worse than the disease sometimes." "Exactly," Dr. Zhang continued. "We've developed a treatment that shows incredible promise. Our preliminary results are amazing. But getting approval for expanded trials? That's where we're stuck." Trump's expression grew more serious. "Tell us specifically what you're dealing with. No sugarcoating." Dr. Zhang pulled out her tablet again, this time showing a complex timeline of approval processes. "Look at this. Each step of approval takes months, sometimes years. Meanwhile, we have patients waiting, people who could be helped right now." "I've seen this before," Trump interjected. "In construction, we'd sometimes have perfectly good buildings sitting empty because of red tape. But this is different. We're talking about people's lives." A hospital administrator in the group spoke up. "The liability issues alone are enough to make most institutions nervous. Nobody wants to be first." "But somebody has to be first," Dr. Zhang responded passionately. "Every major medical breakthrough in history happened because someone was willing to be first." Trump stood up and began pacing, his business instincts clearly engaged. "Okay, let's break this down. You've got three main problems: funding, approvals, and institutional support. Am I right?" Dr. Zhang nodded. "And they're all connected. Without proper funding, we can't complete the documentation needed for approvals. Without approvals, institutions are hesitant to support us. Without institutional support, it's harder to get funding. It's an endless cycle." A woman wearing a board member's badge from a major hospital chain joined the conversation. "Dr. Zhang, your research could revolutionize spinal cord treatment, but have you considered partnering with larger research institutions?" "We've tried," Dr. Zhang replied, her frustration evident but professional. "But most large institutions want to take control of the research. They want to do it their way, on their timeline. Meanwhile, we've got patients who need help now." Trump snapped his fingers. "That's it. That's the real problem. The system is set up to slow things down, not speed things up." He turned to the group. "You know what I learned in business? Sometimes you need to create a new path when the old ones aren't working." A biotechnology expert who had been quietly listening spoke up. "What if we created a consortium? Multiple institutions working together, sharing the risk and the reward?" Dr. Zhang's eyes lit up. That could work. Instead of one institution taking all the risk, we spread it out. Plus, with multiple partners, we could run parallel trials in different locations. Trump was now fully energized. "Now we're thinking big, really big. Doctor, what would you need to make something like that happen?" She didn't hesitate. "3 things. First, we need a core group of committed partners willing to take a calculated risk. Second, we need streamlined approval processes, maybe through a pilot program designation. And third, we need bridge funding to keep our current research going while we set this up." The hospital board member was already taking notes. "I can think of at least 4 institutions that might be interested in this kind of collaboration. And I know people at the FDA," added another guest. "They've been looking for innovative ways to speed up the approval process for promising treatments. Trump pulled out his phone. Let me make a few calls. I know some people, good people, smart people, who understand both the business and medical sides of this. Dr. Zhang watched in amazement as the group around her began to grow again, with each person adding their own expertise and connections to the mix. What had started as a simple discussion about challenges had transformed into an impromptu strategy session. A renowned physical rehabilitation specialist joined the group, adding his perspective. Dr. Zhang, your research could change how we approach not just spinal cord injuries, but nerve damage treatment in general. This is bigger than any one institution. Trump turned back to Dr. Zhang. You know what I'm seeing here? I'm seeing something that could be historic, but it's going to take all of us working together. Are you ready for that kind of challenge? She looked around the circle of faces, each person representing a different piece of the puzzle they were trying to solve. Mr. President, I've been ready for this challenge since the day I decided to become a doctor. The question is, are we ready to change how medical innovation happens? The energy in their corner of the ballroom was electric. People were exchanging cards, making notes, setting up future meetings. What had started as a list of obstacles was transforming into a blueprint for action. As the evening began to wind down, Dr. Zhang realized something profound. Sometimes the biggest challenges aren't just opportunities in disguise. They're catalysts for completely new ways of thinking. And sometimes it takes an unexpected meeting between unlikely allies to set those new ideas in motion. The energy in the Palm Beach Medical Center ballroom had reached a fever pitch. Trump stood at the podium again, but this time something was different. The usual political polish was gone, replaced by genuine excitement as he addressed the crowded room. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying across the hushed space. I've been to thousands of events, met countless brilliant people. But tonight, something extraordinary is happening right here in this room. Dr. Michelle Zhang sat nearby, her wheelchair positioned at an angle where she could see both Trump and the audience. She noticed how people were hanging on every word, their dinner plates forgotten. Earlier tonight, I met Dr. Zhang, Trump continued, gesturing toward her. And let me tell you, what she's doing with spinal cord research, it's incredible, absolutely incredible. But here's the thing that really got me, she's not just working on a medical breakthrough, she's fighting against a system that moves too slowly when people need help right now. He paused, looking around the room. You know what? I understand buildings. I understand business. But Dr. Zhang understands something more important. She understands hope. Real hope, backed by science and determination. Dr. Zhang felt her throat tighten with emotion as Trump continued. Now we've got a choice to make. We can all go home tonight, say what a nice event this was, maybe write a small check. Or, he paused for effect, we can do something that people will remember for generations. The room was so quiet you could hear the ice clinking in water glasses. I've been talking with some very smart people in this room, brilliant doctors, successful business leaders, incredible philanthropists. And here's what we've figured out. The old way of doing things isn't working fast enough. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Trump's voice grew more passionate. Dr. Zhang's team has already proven their treatment works. The science is solid. The results are real. But they're stuck in a maze of paperwork and procedures while people who could be helped are waiting. He gestured to a group of prominent hospital board members and medical investors. These fantastic people right here, they're ready to form a medical innovation consortium. Right now. Tonight. But they need others to step up too. The audience was fully engaged now, many leaning forward in their seats. Trump continued, I'm not just asking for donations. I'm asking for partners. People who want to be part of something revolutionary. A well-known tech entrepreneur stood up from his table. Mr. President, count me in. This is exactly the kind of innovation my foundation looks for. Before he'd even sat down, the head of a major medical equipment company rose. Our company will commit to providing whatever equipment Dr. Zhang's team needs for their expanded trials. Trump smiled broadly. Now that's what I'm talking about. But we're just getting started. Dr. Zhang watched in amazement as more people began standing up, making commitments. A hospital chain CEO promised priority access to their rehabilitation facilities. A pharmaceutical company executive offered to help navigate the FDA approval process. You see what's happening here? Trump asked, his voice filled with emotion. This is how America becomes great, people coming together, cutting through the red tape, making things happen. He turned to Dr. Zhang. Doctor, would you like to tell everyone what this means for your research? Moving her wheelchair to the podium, Dr. Zhang took a deep breath. What this means, she paused, gathering her thoughts, is that we can stop telling patients to wait and start telling them to hope. With your support, we can expand our trials immediately. We can gather data faster. We can help more people sooner. A retired neurosurgeon in the audience raised his hand. Dr. Zhang, I've spent 40 years treating spinal cord injuries. What you're developing could change everything. How quickly could you scale up with proper support? With the kind of support being offered tonight, she smiled, we could triple our research capacity within months. Instead of helping dozens of patients, we could help hundreds, then thousands. Trump stepped back to the microphone. Folks, this is bigger than just one research project. We're creating a new model here, a faster way to bring medical breakthroughs to the people who need them. The enthusiasm in the room was contagious. People were standing, clapping, reaching for their phones to make calls. Business cards were being exchanged, impromptu meetings scheduled. A prominent philanthropist made his way to Dr. Zhang. Doctor, I'd like to establish a special fund specifically for fast-tracking promising medical innovations like yours. Would you help us design the framework? As the evening reached its peak, Dr. Zhang found herself surrounded by a group of people she'd only read about in business magazines, all of them eager to help turn her research into reality. Trump watched it all with satisfaction, occasionally making introductions or joining conversations. This wasn't about politics or publicity, it was about being part of something genuinely important. As the formal part of the evening wound down, he made his way back to Dr. Zhang. You know, he said quietly, sometimes all it takes is getting the right people in the room. But it also takes someone special to make them listen. He gestured to the buds of activity around them. This is just the beginning. Looking around at all the people working together, doctors, business leaders, scientists, and philanthropists, Dr. Zhang realized he was right. This wasn't just a turning point for her research. It was a turning point for how medical innovation itself could happen. And it all started with an unexpected conversation at a charity gala. The morning after the Palm Beach Medical Center gala, Dr. Michelle Zhang's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. News of the previous night's events had spread like wildfire through the medical community. As she wheeled herself into her research lab, she could feel the excitement in the air. Dr. Zhang, her lead researcher, called out, waving a tablet. Have you seen the news? We're everywhere. The laboratory's usual quiet atmosphere was charged with energy as team members gathered around computer screens, reading articles about their work. One headline caught her eye. Former President champions groundbreaking spinal cord research. Another read, Medical innovation gets fast-track support at Palm Beach Gala. But it wasn't the headlines that made her pause, it was the flood of emails filling her inbox. We've received over 50 inquiries from major hospitals wanting to participate in our trials, her research coordinator announced, barely containing her excitement. And that's just from this morning. Dr. Zhang smiled, remembering Trump's words from the night before. Sometimes all it takes is getting the right people in the room. He had been right, but none of them had anticipated just how big the ripple effect would be. Her office phone rang. It was the director of a prestigious rehabilitation center in Chicago. Dr. Zhang, we've been following your research for months, he said warmly. After hearing about last night's event, our board met in an emergency session this morning. We want to be part of your consortium. Before she could even finish that call, another came in from a major medical equipment manufacturer. They wanted to customize their latest spinal monitoring devices specifically for her team's research protocols. As she wheeled between meetings that morning, Dr. Zhang noticed something different in the faces of her patients. Word had spread, and with it, something precious had bloomed. Hope. Is it true? Asked a young patient during his therapy session. Are they really going to help you help more people? His parents stood nearby, trying not to look too eager for her answer. Yes, she replied, her voice firm with conviction. And not just help more people, help them faster, better, and with more resources than we ever had before. By lunchtime, her team had scheduled video conferences with research facilities across the country. The consortium that had seemed like a dream at the gala was rapidly becoming reality. A notification popped up on her phone. Trump had posted about their meeting on social media. The post was simple but powerful. Met an incredible doctor doing amazing work on spinal cord treatment. America's medical innovation is unmatched when we work together. Proud to support this breakthrough research. The post was being shared thousands of times, bringing attention not just to their specific research, but to the broader issue of streamlining medical innovation. News channels began calling, requesting interviews about the new approach to medical research funding they were pioneering. That afternoon, Dr. Zhang received an unexpected call from a senior FDA official. "We've been looking for projects to include in our new accelerated review program," he explained. "After hearing about your consortium model, we believe your research would be perfect for it." Her team gathered for their usual afternoon meeting, but today was different. The whiteboard that normally held their research timeline was being erased and redrawn with an ambitious new schedule. With the new support and resources, her lead scientist explained, pointing to the timeline, "We can compress our 5-year plan into just 18 months. We're not cutting corners, we're just removing obstacles." A young researcher raised her hand. "Dr. Zhang, my cousin is a tech reporter. She wants to do a feature story about how this could change the way medical research is funded in the future. Would you be willing to talk to her?" Before Dr. Zhang could answer, her phone buzzed again. It was a message from the hospital board chairman. "National Medical Innovation Conference wants you and President Trump to give the keynote speech next month. Theme: Breaking Barriers in Medical Research. Are you interested?" As she looked around at her energized team, Dr. Zhang remembered something else Trump had said at the gala. "This is just the beginning." He had been right about that too. What started as a chance encounter was growing into something much bigger. A movement to change how medical breakthroughs make their way from the lab to the people who need them. That evening, as she prepared to leave the lab, a maintenance worker stopped her. "Doc," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "my brother's been paralyzed for 8 years. He read about what happened last night. He said it's the first time he's felt real hope in years." Dr. Zhang reached out and squeezed his hand. This was why they did the work. This was why every breakthrough mattered. And now, with the support generated from that unexpected meeting with Trump, they could help more people like his brother sooner rather than later. As she headed home, her phone buzzed one last time. It was a message from Trump. "Dr. Zhang, incredible response to last night. This is how real change happens. Keep pushing forward. America is behind you." She smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring even more opportunities, more challenges, and more chances to turn scientific possibilities into real hope for real people. The ripple effect of that one evening was still spreading, and its waves were only getting stronger. 6 months had passed since that fateful evening at the Palm Beach Medical Center Gala. Dr. Michelle Zhang sat in her wheelchair at the window of her newly expanded research facility, watching as construction crews put the finishing touches on the building's sign, National Center for Spinal Cord Innovation. Her phone buzzed, a message from Trump's office confirming his visit to the lab later that day. She smiled, remembering how that unexpected conversation had set everything in motion. "Dr. Zhang." Her assistant hurried in, tablet in hand. "The latest trial results just came in. You're going to want to see these right away." Looking at the data, Dr. Zhang felt her heart skip a beat. The results were even better than they'd hoped. The new treatment protocol, now being tested at 12 different facilities across the country, was showing unprecedented success rates. "Should we wait to share these with President Trump during his visit?" her assistant asked. "No," Dr. Zhang replied, reaching for her phone. "He's been as invested in this as anyone. He should know now." She quickly typed out a message, attaching the preliminary results. Within minutes, her phone rang. "Doctor, these numbers, they're incredible." Trump's voice was filled with excitement. "I'm bringing some extra people with me today. The world needs to know about this." The hours flew by as her team prepared for the visit. The lab had changed so much in 6 months. What was once a cramped research space had become a state-of-the-art facility, humming with activity and purpose. At precisely 2 p.m., the security team arrived, followed by Trump and an entourage that included leading medical journalists and healthcare officials. Dr. Zhang couldn't help but notice how different this visit felt from their first meeting. There was a warmth of familiarity, a shared sense of accomplishment. Doctor, Trump greeted her with a broad smile. Show me everything. I want to see what we've helped build. As they toured the facility, Dr. Zhang explained their progress. Remember when we talked about helping dozens of patients? Well, we've now treated over 300. The consortium model you helped us create has changed everything. They stopped at a window overlooking the rehabilitation center where patients were working with physical therapists. See that young man there? She pointed. 6 months ago, he couldn't move his legs at all. Now he's taking his first steps. Trump watched silently for a moment, genuinely moved. You know, he said finally, I've built a lot of buildings, made a lot of deals, but this is different. A group of researchers presented their latest findings, showing how the streamlined approval process had cut years off their development timeline. The FDA representative in the group explained how their model was being adapted for other promising medical treatments. President Trump, Dr. Zhang, a journalist spoke up, would you say this partnership has exceeded your expectations? Trump looked at Dr. Zhang, gesturing for her to answer first. She thought carefully before speaking. What's exceeded my expectations isn't just the medical progress, it's how this has changed the entire landscape of medical innovation. We're not just treating patients, we're creating a new way forward. And let me tell you, Trump added, when we first met at that gala, I knew Dr. Zhang was special. But what's happened here is beyond what any of us imagined. This is American innovation at its best. They moved to the conference room, where monitors showed video links to partner facilities across the country. Each location had its own story of success to share, new breakthroughs, lives changed, hope restored. A researcher from Texas reported how their modification to the treatment protocol had helped a patient regain hand function. A team in Michigan shared data showing unprecedented nerve regeneration rates. A doctor in Florida described how a young accident victim had recovered enough to return to college. Mr. President, Dr. Zhang said, turning to Trump, remember when you said sometimes all it takes is getting the right people in the room? Well, look at what that one evening has created. Trump nodded, surveying the busy facility. But it took someone special to make us all listen. Your story, your dedication, that's what brought everyone together. As the tour continued, they passed a wall of letters. Hundreds of them from patients and families whose lives had been touched by the research. Trump stopped to read a few, visibly moved by the personal stories. Dr. Zhang, he said, his voice softer than usual, this is your real legacy, not just the science, but the lives you've changed. The visit concluded in the main laboratory, where Dr. Zhang's team had prepared a presentation about their plans for the future. But before they could begin, Trump had an announcement of his own. Doctor, I've been talking with some people, very important people, he began. What you've created here isn't just a research center. It's a model for the future. We want to establish similar consortiums for other critical medical research areas. Dr. Zhang's eyes widened as he continued. Your success has opened doors. People are ready to invest in medical innovation like never before. They've seen what's possible when we cut through the red tape and work together. Looking around the room full of dedicated researchers, medical pioneers, and supporters, Dr. Zhang felt a profound sense of gratitude. That chance meeting at a gala had grown into something far beyond a single research project. It had become a movement to transform how medical breakthroughs reach the people who need them. As the day drew to a close, Trump had one last question. Doctor, what's next for you and your team? Dr. Zhang smiled, her eyes bright with determination. Mr. President, we're just getting started. Every breakthrough leads to new questions, new possibilities. But now we have something even more powerful than advanced technology or funding. What's that? Trump asked. We have proof that when people come together, when they truly believe in something, there's no barrier too big to break through. That's not just science, that's hope in action. As Trump prepared to leave, he paused at the door. You know, Doctor, some people say everything happens for a reason. That night at the gala, that wasn't just luck. That was destiny. Dr. Zhang watched as the presidential motorcade pulled away, reflecting on how a single unexpected encounter had set in motion a chain of events that would help thousands of people. It was a reminder that sometimes the biggest breakthroughs in life don't happen in a laboratory, They happen when people dare to believe in something bigger than themselves.